I've been looking into this, and there's a theory that the emotion anger actually plays an evolutionary role in that.
Go on.
The times that we feel anger, firstly, like when our individual boundaries have been crossed, or when we've actually witnessed the world working in a way that it's not supposed to work. So when we've theoretically witnessed an injustice. So these are the times when it is most likely for anger to emerge, as an emotion. So we've got this inbuilt evolutionary mechanism by which theoretically we should be able to identify injustice. Now, can it go wrong? Absolutely. There's a whole bunch of situations in which we get angry where we're not supposed to get angry, or our anger is out of proportion to what actually happened. So it's not a perfect mechanism, by any circumstance. And if we're defining justice in terms of what do we get angry about, there's a whole bunch of room for error in that. We could be subject to mob justice. We could so there is room for rationality in that. But the idea that it's inherently rational, I think probably lends itself more to this argument in terms of being more relevant to truth and order, and the idea that we're trying to make society predictable on some level, because when we live if we live under the assumption that the average person obeys the law, like the average person does not want to be punished for breaking the law, so theoretically they're going to follow the law. What that does is that gives society a set of guidelines by which this is the type of behavior that we expect from you. And that increases our ability to theoretically predict the behavior of the next person within society. Now, the example that I use is, I'm pretty confident if I walk out the front door, I'm not going to get stabbed. Like for the most part,
good.
I don't live. I'm fortunate not to live in a place where I have to worry about that. But I look at, what are because I don't have to worry about that, I can do things like this podcast, for example, where I can think about other stuff.
Yes.
Because my safety is assured. I'm not in survival mode all the time. I'm not living in an unpredictable environment where I got to worry about who's going to do what if I step out the front door.
Yeah.
So
are you tying that then, this sense of predictability within your environment based on societal standards, as a form of societal justice then?
Look, I mean, this is it might not be perfect in terms of and again, this comes down to, is the law just? It might not be a perfect representation of what we feel is acceptable behavior within society, and it might not reflect everybody's view, and our views change over time as well. So, there has to be room for evolution in the law. This is why we keep making new laws and we keep going over existing ones. And why we've got people tasked with interpreting the context of the application of the law, which by itself lends itself to a whole bunch of other problems, because in terms of consistently applying the law and the actual predictability of it, if we're taking a context-specific view, then...
I think context is really, really important. Interpretation.
I do think context is important as well, but it affects consistency of application.
It does. So, but I think humans are generally intelligent enough to place social norms above the law, if that makes sense. Because there is kind of an understanding that a social norm and the law would align, as you've said, when you step out your front door, that you don't expect to get stabbed. So most people would probably think that that is not just a law, but a social norm, that no one should get physically assaulted and their life threatened when they step out their front door. But it's also against the law to not cross at the lights or not cross at a crossing. And most people, if they can look left and right before they cross the road and there's no cars coming, will jaywalk. Now that's illegal, but it's also a social norm that, like, if it's safe, just cross the road. So, like, I do think that there's a lot of context in people's application of the law, or whether they adhere to the law at least.
Let me ask you two questions. Firstly, is it appropriate to have laws which might not reflect social norms? Like, say that jaywalking thing, for example.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it's meant to improve safety.
Yeah.
Right? It's meant to advocate for safety. That's why it's a law.
Yeah.
Is there any benefit to having a law which people break consistently? Like, is there, or is that like a tool of oppression, for example?
Well,
is that a way that we go back and say, if we're looking for flaws in what you've done, they're easy to find.
Yeah.
Because we've got a whole bunch of laws that,
there's a generally, I don't know if this is like more just generally progressive or leftist as opposed to socialist view on the law around, like, if you park illegally, let's say, and you get a fine because you've overstayed the meter that you were supposed to be there for 2 hours and you were there for 8 or something, and you got a fine. Now, people have argued that if the penalty for breaking the law is a monetary fine, that's not actually a fine based on, society standards about being penalized for doing the wrong thing. That's a class war issue, in the sense that, like, there might be rich people that fine would mean nothing to. Like, a $80 fine to a rich person is like, fuck, give me another one. I don't give a shit. But, like, if this person is poor and they can't afford to pay the fine, and then they end up, racking up a few of those, and then they get jail time, then, like, does the penalty for breaking the law actually reflect what society would call an acceptable response to that?
I think the penalty is meant to serve two functions. Like, firstly, it's meant to be a deterrent.
A deterrent,
for breaking the law. But secondly, it's meant to be like a remedy. In this case, a remedy against the state for breaking the law. Like, if you break the law, these are the consequences of breaking the law.
Yes.
And this is how we go back to restoring a state of order.
But I'm just saying, in a society like ours, if the penalty for doing the wrong thing is monetary,
and so then that disproportionately impacts different segments of society.
That's right. Yeah.
So the question around, does it serve those two functions? We start to see the nuance in that question.
Yes, and then this comes down to a question of justice. Because is it just to find someone that doesn't have the means to pay the fine? Is that the most just form of penalty for that person? And is it just to find someone $80 who is a billionaire? And this
is the idea of the context dependent stuff. Like recognizing that there's going to be times where the law doesn't get it right. We can't afford for consistent application of the law. That's when the legal system is meant to step in and be like, hey, this is not how it's supposed to work.
Yes, but the liberal ideal of the justice system is this concept of the law being blind. So if the penalty is $80, if you're a billionaire or you're dirt poor, who cares? We will blindly serve justice. And that is, everybody gets an $80 fine for disobeying the parking rules in this area or something like that. And that's blind justice. And that is justice. But some people would argue that is unjust.
Let me ask you about, again, going back to the idea of sort of, justice facilitating predictability. If we've got an inconsistent application of the law, then you walk out the front door and you don't even know if you're breaking the law or not. If we're introducing that level of uncertainty, not only might you not know if you're breaking the law, you might not even know what the penalties are associated with breaking those laws. And I guess you're not defending rich people or anything, but like if you know that the law is going to be focused on sort of targeting you. Or even if you're at the other end of the scale and you know that you're going to receive a disproportionate impact of the laws that are made, how important is how important is equality in law?